Right now, in labs on every continent, a woman's cells are alive. Dividing, multiplying. They've been alive for 75 years. She died in 1951. She was 31. She never knew her cells were taken. Her family didn't find out for 25 years. And those cells? They helped create the polio vaccine. Cancer treatments? COVID-19 vaccines. They've been to space. 110,000 scientific papers. 5 Nobel Prizes. 50 million metric tons of her cells have been grown. Her name was Henrietta Lacks, and nobody asked her permission. Henrietta Lacks was born in 1920 in Roanoke, Virginia. Her mother died when she was 4. She was raised by her grandfather in a log cabin that had once been slave quarters on a tobacco plantation. She had hazel eyes. She always wore red nail polish and pleated skirts. She dropped out of school in 6th grade to work the tobacco fields. At 14, she had her first child. At 21, she married her cousin Day. They moved to Baltimore so Day could work at Bethlehem Steel. 5 children. A small house on New Pittsburgh Avenue. Catholic. A woman nobody outside her community would have noticed. Until January 29th, 1951. She went to Johns Hopkins, one of the only hospitals in Baltimore that treated black patients, with a knot in her womb. The diagnosis, cervical cancer, and what happened next would change medicine forever. But Henrietta would never know. During treatment, a doctor took 2 samples from her cervix, one healthy, one cancerous. Without asking, without telling her. The samples went to Dr. George Gay's lab. For 20 years, Gay had been trying to grow human cells outside the body. Every attempt failed. Cells died within days. Mary Kubitschek, Gay's assistant, placed Henrietta's cancer cells in a culture and waited. They didn't die. They doubled. Every 20 to 24 hours. Again and again. And they never stopped. Most human cells have a limit. They divide about 50 times, then stop. It's called the Hayflick limit. The protective caps on DNA, telomeres, get shorter each time. Eventually the cell dies. Henrietta's cells had something different. Active telomerase, an enzyme that rebuilds the caps, over and over, indefinitely. The first immortal human cell line. Gay called them HeLa. H-E, first 2 letters of Henrietta, L-A, first 2 of Lacks. But here's the part that matters. While those cells kept dividing, Henrietta was dying. The cancer had spread everywhere. October 4th, 1951. She died at 31, 5 children, buried in an unmarked grave. Her cells didn't notice. Within 2 years, HeLa cells were being mass-produced at Tuskegee University. Jonas Salk used them to develop the polio vaccine, the vaccine that saved millions of lives. 129N92 50 fect payrist 50 pasted. Henrietta's family didn't know. For 25 years, while her cells were flown to every continent, while they helped cure polio, while scientists built careers and companies built fortunes, her children didn't know their mother's cells were alive. Her son Lawrence once asked, "Can you tell me what my mama's cells really did? I know they did something important, but nobody tells us nothing." In 1975, a researcher mentioned it at a dinner party. That's how the family found out. A dinner party. Her youngest son, Zachariah, carried the anger his whole life. Everybody always saying Henrietta Lacks donated those cells. She didn't donate nothing. They took them and didn't ask. And then there was Deborah, Henrietta's daughter. She was barely 2 when her mother died, too young to remember anything. Deborah spent her whole life searching for the mother she never knew. And then she discovered that her mother was, in a way, still alive, in labs, being bought and sold. The cruel irony. Deborah, daughter of the woman who made modern medicine possible, couldn't afford her own medication. She suffered a stroke in 2001. She died in 2009. She never saw justice. Henrietta's story isn't an accident. It's a pattern. In the 1950s, Johns Hopkins was one of the only major hospitals that treated black patients. The segregated wards, the public wards. Doctors routinely used those patients for research, usually without their knowledge. At the same time, the U.S. government was running the Tuskegee syphilis study. 600 black men told they were receiving treatment. They weren't, even after a cure was found. The study ran for 40 years. Dr. Chester Southam injected HeLa cells into patients and prisoners without consent to see what would happen. Henrietta's cells were taken in 1951. The legal standard for informed consent in medical research wasn't established until 1991. 40 years. Her son said it simply, "They took them and didn't ask." In 2010, a writer named Rebecca Skloot published The Immortal Life of Henrietta Lacks. She'd spent a decade researching the story, working closely with Deborah, before her death. The book became an instant bestseller, translated into 25 languages, required reading in medical schools across America. For the first time, the world knew the name behind HeLa. In 2013, when scientists published HeLa's DNA sequence without consulting the family. Again, the NIH finally reached an agreement. 2 Lacks family members would join the committee controlling access to the genomic data. Then the lawsuits began. Thermo Fisher Scientific, a company selling HeLa cells for profit, settled on July 31st, 2023, Henrietta's 103rd birthday. Novartis settled February 2026, 75 years after the cells were taken. Other lawsuits remain active. The family's lawyers said, "This is not over." Right now, as you watch this, Henrietta's cells are alive in a lab somewhere, dividing. They've outlived her by 75 years. They'll outlive all of us. If you've ever received a vaccine, if you've ever benefited from cancer research, if you've ever taken a medication tested on human cells, part of that came from a woman who never finished 6th grade, never left Baltimore, never knew her cells were taken. Her family couldn't afford health insurance, while her cells generated billions. What does it mean when the most important cells in medical history belong to someone who was never asked? When the foundation of modern medicine was built on a woman who was buried in an unmarked grave? Maybe the answer isn't in the science. Maybe it's in what we choose to remember and who we choose to forget. Henrietta Lacks died at 31. Her cells never did. Next week, a man with a stick measured the entire Earth 2,200 years ago, more accurate than anything until satellites. The story of Eratosthenes.